This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Yes. Anyone, any questions, guys, from the yesterday's class? So just to recap, we were talking about repositories, and we also categorized the repositories into distributed and centralized. We said why distributed is now very popular. We were just looking at a comparison between what you get in distributed versus what you get in centralized out here. And then we were telling something called as commits and commit history. Then we were talking about how do you do a git clone into your local machine, how do you make changes, and how do you do a git push. We are talking to look at, let's say, git push out here. And after that, we are talking about branches. We're telling how do you create new branches, and if you make change in one branch, how do you do a merge using a pull request, using, let's say, something known as a pull request out here as such. So these are a couple of things that we were talking about yesterday. And also you can create a branch using VS Code only. You can create a branch, you can create a pull request using VS Code and all these things out here as such. We'll talk about that as well. We'll see, we'll take a look at that as well. But before I move forward, anyone, any questions here? Any questions that I can address? Anything or any questions as such that I can address out here? Okay, so let's go. And very importantly, before we move forward, right, into today's topic, just would like to create or just would like to, let's say, cover one quick topic out here on user addition. In Azure also there were multiple users that you can add. In Azure DevOps also you can go ahead and add multiple users out here. How do you add that? Is that if I go into something called organization settings here, I have a tab called what? Users. And I can say, again, I have multiple users out here. If you see, I can say add a user. So I'll say add a user, and you can give the ID of that particular user, telling it as RBAC something like reader. I have an account called RBAC reader at the rate gmail.com. In your case, let's say the real accounts like Microsoft.com, Accenture.com, whatever it is. I'll say yes, please add this user. And there are levels of access that you can give to your user. I'll just select basic. I'll also see what is the user levels, user access levels in Azure DevOps. We'll also look at the documentation on what you get here and all these things. Now, it just depends upon what kind of permissions that you get assigned to and all those things out here as such. So if you just scroll down, there's things like let's see, add user into the project. Not this one about permissions. Just scroll down. So there should be a documentation which is telling you what kind of an access level that you get and what kind of a permission that you inherit from that particular access level. I'll just send across the documentation for you. I'm not finding it right now on what is basic and all these things out. Stakeholders access levels, about access levels. Let's see. Okay, I'll take a look at that and I'll just send it across to you all. But for now, what I'll do is I'll go with a basic access level. I'll say a basic access level, and let's see, basic access level. Access levels, and again I think yes, so you have something called basic plus test plans, stakeholder, and Visual Studio subscriber. So it tells you, provides almost every feature. Let's say when you go for a basic access level out here, stakeholder, then you have some, it's telling can be assigned to unlimited users. It only provides a partial access to your private projects, full access to your public projects out here. Partial access out here is something that you get, but you don't need any licenses out here to go ahead and assign. Mostly in an organization, we go ahead and do a Visual Studio subscriber. You buy a license so that you can go ahead and, let's say, and it also goes ahead and, let's say, enable you something like basic and this one. So basic for most of the purposes, but again, you cannot add more than 5 basic users in a subscription, sorry, in an organization out here. So limited out here. Stakeholder limited access, but you can go ahead and let's say add unlimited users out there. But in an organization, if you have multiple people, you need to go into something like a Visual Studio subscriber access out here as such. In my case, since I'm using a basic account, I'll just go ahead and say basic level, and then it's telling which project that you want to add this particular user to. Like you can have multiple projects out here. Again, under an organization, you can have multiple projects, right? For example, I only want this user to have access to our project, which is called sample project. And what kind of access? Reader, contributor, administrator. Same thing. You have RBACs in Azure, owner, reader, contributor. Same thing out here. As an administrator, this particular person can go ahead and create repositories, delete repositories, add branches, delete branches, and all these things out. But also, he can go ahead and add other users. As a contributor, I cannot go ahead and add another user. Apart from that, the rest would be the same thing. I'll say project contributor and I'll say add. Now it's telling running the task. It's telling the user is added. So if you now see, I have a user called rbacreader@gmail.com, and this user would have got an email. So if I look at that, let's go to Gmail out here. Let's say sign in, and let's say rbacreader@gmail.com. As when I do that, I'll just go ahead and give a password here. So not now, and let's move forward and do that. Now it's telling you are invited to join the organization called dev.azure.com/DevOps classes 1982. I'll say yes, please go ahead, join now. And as and when I do that, it's going to ask me to sign in. I'll just go ahead and sign in again. RPAC reader at gmail.com. I'll just give the password out here that I do have, and I'll say looks good. I'll say no. I'll say no thanks. And I'm now trying to log into that particular organization with that particular name called DevOps classes 992. And you see, I only have access to what? 8 a.m. project. This project, right? I did not give the access, but still this user has the access. Reason being, this is a public project. This is a private project, and as the administrator, this is an administrator account. Do you see I have multiple projects under this 9 a.m. project, 8 a.m. project, because multiple classes are going on, I'm doing multiple projects out here. Then you have master, something, all these things, right? You have multiple projects out here, and I have unlimited access on all the multiple projects out here as such. Whereas as a RBAC reader out here who's got a contributor permission, I only have access to what? The 8 a.m. project out here as such. I cannot go into the organization setting. I don't have even the option to go ahead and say add the user. I don't even have the option to go ahead and do that. Reason being, I'm a contributor in this particular project out here as such. Now, if you see in the left also, right, I as a user am a part of multiple organizations, not one single organization, multiple organization, because I created this organization for some demo purpose. So that's the reason it's able to show. You can also switch between multiple organizations. So if I click on this one, right, I'll go into that particular organization, and probably I'm just a reader in this particular organization out here. So I can do, let's say I can switch between multiple organization out here with very little ease out here, with a lot of ease out here as such. So I can go ahead and do a switch out here as such out there. Yes, any questions with the user addition on how do you add users? Again, the reason I'm telling you all is because tomorrow when you do Azure DevOps in an organization, you will be responsible to add users. You will be, let's say, you will be responsible to go ahead and let's say checking the permissions of the users and all these things out here. And also for your practice purpose, you can add your friends inside it. You can collaborate together and you can practice this out here as such. Yes, anyone, any questions here? Anyone, any questions that I can take till here?
Do we have a limit on this Azure DevOps board adding a project?
Can you come again, please? Do we have what?
limit, Kiran? Do we have a limit like this adding new project or organizations? Any limit?
No, there is no limit.
Okay.
Okay, I see a couple of questions. When we have the option to okay, when we created a project, is that the same as creating? Okay, we have an option called invite when we created the project. Is that the same option? Yes, it's the same option. Option in email invite. Okay, an option to email invite is the user has to add. Yes, firstly, the user has to be added at the organization level, and then you can go ahead and let's say send across the invitations out here as such. Yes. Any more questions, guys? Okay, let's see. Now, let's get inside our repository. And we created this particular demo repository, and we created two different branches out here in this particular repository out here. So the tree looks something like this. I have a repository, and I'm now telling that you can have multiple branches inside a repository. So I can have something like the main branch, and then yesterday I went ahead and created something called as a test branch, and then I have test branch 1 2 3 so on and so forth out here as such. Now yesterday someone asked a question, is that, see, why do we even need multiple branches like this? Because everything can be done in one branch. Why do you even want multiple branches out here? What is the significance of having a branch? That is where I would like you all to, or I'd like to go into a very important concept called branching and merging strategy. Strategy. Very, very, very important. Any organization who's developing a software needs to have a proper flow of the software development, because see, we are working in an agile methodology. We are doing an agile, so everything is a sprint related operation, meaning each and every sprint has its own target. Each and every sprint has its own delivery mechanism and all these things out here. And also there should be a proper flow to your project, so that if something goes wrong, right, you don't start getting confused, where my project is, how I should, let's say address this issue and all that stuff. You should have a proper flow, a proper strategy that your project needs to follow out here. Let's say I have an example. Let's say that we are working for a client called Ola again, or anything, Ola, Uber, IRCTC, whatever it is, whatever, let's say, application that you can think about. You can think about that application for ease, so and everyone can understand. Let's say Android. You're working for an application called Android. You're working for a company called Google out here, and this company decides to develop an Android version called version 10, 10.0. This is what they're trying to develop, and what they do initially is that they say, okay, fine, we'll use Azure DevOps, we'll add all the users, we'll assign the roles, we'll now start creating repository. I'll say, I'll just name this repository as something like this. I'll just go ahead and name this out. I'll say create. As and when I create, what I get is a main branch out here as such. So as this particular company, I went and created a repository, and I got something called as a branch, which is called as what? A main branch. This is going to be slightly confusing, so please bear with me, and I'll try to go as slow as possible. Please stop me if you have any questions anywhere. So I, as a company, am creating something called as a main branch, or you can also call this as what? Master or main, anything is same. Now, in a typical organization, I'm just talking about a typical software development lifecycle, an example of a typical software development lifecycle. We generally don't use the main branch. We generally do not use the main branch. We keep the main branch for a backup purpose. Meaning I take the code and I just keep the code here which is working or which was working. I keep the code that was working for a backup purpose. Just code which was working. So that just in case something happens, I can simply take this code and I can give it to my client or I can run it and so on and so forth. So I will not allow my developers or QS or DevOps engineers to commit on this particular branch. No commits are allowed on this particular branch. How do I do that? Very simple. If I go into this particular branch, right, there are three dots here. I'll click on this. I'll say lock. I have implemented a lock out here. And if there is a lock, I'm a user working this organization. And if I come here, look into the files and look into, let's say, something like Android, I'm able to see there's a lock. Again, I as a contributor can unlock this out. So I can remove the permissions also on what basically I can do and all that stuff. Do you see what it is now telling me? That if I try to unlock, I cannot unlock this out. Come here, and what I do is I'll try to edit. I'll try to add a commit, add something. This is logged. This lock is implemented by an administrator. I as a contributor can look at the branch, but I cannot remove the lock on top of this particular branch out here as such, because this reference branch has been locked by something. Reason being, I want to implement or I want to keep this branch for my backup strategy, just for backups. So what I will do as an administrator is that I will now create a new branch for my developers to work on, and I'll call this branch as a develop branch or a development branch. I'll create this branch. It's based out of what? The main branch out here, and I'll say create. So now I created a develop branch, and I'll make my develop branch as the default branch of my development strategy or the default branch of my repository. How do I do that? Again, right click here, again click here, and you have what? Set as default branch. Now I have something called as what? Develop being set as a default branch out here, and now I'm telling my developers that you know what? I created a new branch called develop branch. This is now called as a develop branch out here. This develop branch of my repository is for your daily developmental activities. Meaning this develop branch right now is something that you can take, and if you have a code, you can go ahead and commit your code inside the develop branch. But very importantly, I will not allow direct commits on top of this particular branch. No direct commits. Because if you directly commit on top of the branch, you cannot undo the commit. It's very difficult to undo the commit. And also, imagine you just don't have one person. You have thousands of people working in that project. Imagine everyone is committing on the same time. There'll be a lot of issues. The stability of your code will not be ensured. And also, before I commit the code into my develop branch, I would like to understand what is the quality of the code. How exactly is the code really functioning? Is the code really good? Or what is the quality of the code and all that stuff is something that I want to question out here. So I'm now telling that no direct commits are allowed directly on top of the develop branch. You as a developer should commit, meaning you are allowed to commit, but using a pull request. And quick question, guys. Let's imagine that you are trying to commit something on this branch using a pull request. What do you need to do a pull request? What would you need to do a pull request out there? Anyone? What do you need to do a pull request? So
There
you're a
should be
developer.
some update.
Sorry, come again, please. There should be some.
There should be some updates in the branch, then only will be pulled.
Yes, which branch? Very importantly, which branch there should be an update in? When you say there should be an update in the branch, only then you can do a pull request. Which branch again?
Child level.
Is it the
Local
develop
repository.
branch? I'm sorry. When we say
Child
there
level,
should be, can you come again, please?
child level branch.
Child develop branch, or can I say a branch created from the develop branch? A branch that is created from the develop branch out here. So this is what I'm trying to tell is that I will not allow my developers to do a direct commit. No direct commits allowed. Reason being, multiple developers are working on the same branch. If everyone commits in the same time, there will be conflicts. And also, if someone directly commits on top of this particular branch, I cannot ensure that the code that you are committing is good. I mean, it's bug free and all that stuff. So, what I do is to avoid the direct commits. I go into my develop branch and again right click here. There is something called what? Branch policies. Now, there are multiple branch policies. We'll talk about each and everything. But right now, what I'll do, I'll just put one branch policy out here telling I minimally or I require at least one reviewer to go ahead, approve my change or approve my pull request before I go ahead and do a commit. I'll say at least one reviewer. At least one reviewer should go ahead, and also there is an option called allow requesters to approve their own change. Meaning if I am requesting a change, please allow me to do that. No, I won't allow you to do that. I'll just scroll down. There is something called include automatic reviewers. I have already an account, right, which is called RBAC contributor logged in again, or sorry, RBAC reader out here. I'll tell, let's say this reader is a reviewer. I'll say, please go ahead, take this person called RBAC reader at the gmail.com. He's a required reviewer. I'll just save this out. So now what I'm telling is that if you are a developer and you are making some changes on your VS Code, and if you are trying to, let's say, push those changes and merge those changes into your develop branch, you should need an approval. You should now need an approval. This is to make sure that the code is entirely checked, which means that as and when I put a policy here, imagine that I am the developer. Just imagine that I am a developer out here. I come here into the develop branch. I say edit. I'll say this is a sample change. And the next time what I do, commit. Say this is a sample commit. I'll say commit. What's it telling you? Pushes to this branch are what? Not permitted. You must use what? Pull request to update this branch. Reason being, the branch has policies. How would you know whether the branch has policies? Just go to branches. Do you see there is a badge here telling branch has policies? Very importantly, whatever is your default branch of the repository, this will always and always have policies, so that developers should not or cannot do a direct commit. No direct commits are allowed. You cannot do this. So what I'll do is that as a developer, I'm now talking from a developer's perspective. Firstly, I'll do a git clone operation. And what does a git clone do, guys? What exactly will git clone do?
It will copy entire content of the repository from the Git
To
clone.
our local machine, right?
Local.
So yes, it will make a local copy. So what I'll do, I'll go into the develop branch. I'll say clone. I'll say clone in VS Code. Open the VS Code out here. I'll just open this out. And once I open this out, I should get an option telling that where do you want to clone this out. I'll just take a folder. I'll just select repository location. And I'm cloning that particular entire repository called Android inside my local machine. And I'll say open. and I now have something called Android-1 because I already had a folder called Android, so I just created a new folder. Shouldn't be a problem. This is the entire file, and I am working on a branch called what? Develop branch, and even my VS Code is telling me that you know what, you're working on this particular develop branch. Again, if I go ahead and try to commit here, I'll say this is a sample commit on the develop branch. I'm just trying to do something like this. I'll just save. After save, on the left hand side, I get this change. It's telling what exactly is the change basically out here. And I'll give a commit message saying this is a sample commit. And I'll say stage the changes. And now, guys, can I commit this out? Can I do a commit? Yes, no, maybe. Anyone?
Yes,
Yeah, here we can.
Yes, but the branch is locked. The branch has policies, isn't it?
it is local.
You can commit, but you cannot push it.
Exactly. You can commit, you cannot push. Reason being, it's a local branch. That's correct. It's a local branch, so you can do a commit, but you cannot go ahead and do a direct push. You do a direct push, you get the error. Open git log here. Do you see again? Same error message what you were able to get on the cloud. Same thing. Now that's the reason developers go ahead and create, or developers, DevOps engineers, anyone who's working with these repositories, they go ahead and create sub branches, or they go ahead and create their own branches, and we call these as a feature branch. A feature branch out here. For example, if I am doing this change, I'll say feature forward slash, meaning create a folder called feature, inside which I'll create a branch called Kiran test branch, something like that, my name and the name of the branch out here. So if I do this, if I now do this, how can I do this? Do I have to again go into the cloud? Not necessarily. You can click on this. It'll tell you these are all the branches. I'll say create a branch from. I'll say create a branch from. I'll say what is the name of the branch? I'll say FEAT or feature forward slash Kiran test. Enter. I'll create a branch from what? The develop branch. And then I can do what? A publish branch. So now if you see, the branch has changed. I'm working on something called as what? Feature Kiran test. I'll say publish this branch. And as and when I publish this branch, right? Come here, refresh the screen. I have a folder called feature under which I created a, let's say, branch called Kiran test. You can create an alternative branch telling it is feature forward slash Kiran test 2 from the developer. I'll say create. It will come under this particular folder. I don't need this branch. I can delete this out. I can delete this particular branch. I don't need this. I'm good. So now I have a Kiran test in which my change is there. So I as a developer has made this change, and I'll now go ahead and create a pull request. I'll say pull request into what? The develop branch, and I'll say create. As and when I create, guys, do you see what it is telling me right now? RBAC reader, that particular user must what? Approve. Why is this coming into place? Why is this coming into place out here?
To control the course reviewer, because he is a
Yes, it's a
reviewer.
reviewer, right? But what is responsible for this one to come into picture is your branch policy. Branch policy is telling that this particular reviewer is required, and where is that particular branch policy set? Go into branches, policies, this one, telling that you at least need one reviewer, and you need this particular reviewer to go ahead and approve your change. So what I'll do is that in a different window, I logged in like that particular reviewer, right? So I'll just go there. I'm here. Also, if I just go back, right? Do you see I automatically got an email here in my Gmail? I did not do anything. I automatically got an email. It's telling classes DevOps created a pull request, and it's telling this particular pull request is waiting for your approval. Was added. It's telling this is waiting for your approval. I say view pull request here. It's directly taking me into the what? Pull request. I can say approve. As and when before I approve it, I'll also go ahead and review the changes on what exactly they have done. As an administrator or as the project lead, I'll go ahead and do this. I'll say approve. And once approved, right, the developer should go ahead and complete his merge. So if you go here, it's telling RBSE or this particular person has approved this out. As a developer, I can go ahead and let's say complete. And when completing, the suggestion here is to delete your branch. Delete the feature branch after you're done, because feature branches are short-lived branches. They're only for one purpose, to go ahead and let's say merge into the develop. After that's done, you can optionally keep it, but it will create confusions in a long run. So I'll say delete this out. So as and when I do that, I'm merging all my changes into the develop branch. And as and when I merge all my changes into the develop branch, here I have the develop and the main. And in the develop, if you look at the history, there was this particular merge that happened. And if you go into this particular merge, right, there are also something called details. If you come into the details, it will also tell you how it was added, what it was added, what is the PR number that added this out, and how would you navigate to that particular PR, and so on and so forth. So this is the parent and all that stuff, and it's saying this is the commit and this is the pull request that added this particular commit out here. So whenever you work in an organization, right, these terminologies are very very popular, telling that okay fine, I have a main branch, I have a develop branch, I have a feature branch, and developers can sometimes come back to you and tell that, you know what, hey DevOps, do you know I'm trying to commit on top of the develop branch, I'm getting this particular error, what should I do? Telling that I'm not permitted and all that stuff, don't I have permissions? Developers are not expected to know all these things out. So what you need to tell is that, you know what, the branch has policies. You have to create a feature branch, merge it, and optionally you can delete your feature branch out here as such. So yes, any questions till here? Anyone, any questions that I can take till here?
Here, future branch, right? Suppose I'm a developer and
Okay.
I have some code I need to upload to the repository.
Hmm.
So myself cannot be create. I will not be able to create a feature branch and by my own, right? As a developer.
Yes, you can create a feature branch as a developer. Yes, you can do that.
Okay. So if I am able to create by my own, once I was created and once I commit that code,
Okay.
automatically the merge is after the merge is completed. Merge also the developer will do that activity, merge activity.
Yes, merge activity also the developer will do.
He is
He's
the
expected to,
responsible.
yes, yes, he's expected to raise a pull request and complete the merge. Yes,
So once that is completed, automatically the future branch will be deleted and no more. It will not be no more to the in the repository, right?
correct. Yes, sorry,
Again, sometime again after some time, if I want to update the code, again I need to create a feature branch.
not required. You already have the feature branch on your local machine. You can update this and again republish that particular branch. So you can again update the same branch. You can republish the same branch out here. Then again you can go and create a new branch out here. Yes, you can do that. Yes, you are expected to create multiple feature branches on a daily basis and delete them on a daily basis out here as such.
But you are saying that the future branch will be deleted, right? Where it will delete then? If I have that as a developer, if I am working continuously, but my branch will be there in my mission, then where it will be deleted?
This is your local branch, right?
Yes.
And this is a branch on the cloud. And where is the branch on the cloud here? I deleted it. There's no branch at all. Cloud is a common resource. It's a shared resource amongst your team members. And probably your organization is telling you that please don't keep your stale branches out here. Please don't keep your branches out here as such. Delete them out. So I delete this branch on the cloud, not on my local machine. On the local machine, the branch can still be alive.
Okay. So here it will be deleted, but it
Yes,
will be there.
because these are not only us, right? Not only you, right? It's also multiple developers like you will be working on the same thing. In order to avoid confusion, it's a best practice to delete the branch.
So then after the yes, okay. So to avoid like consistency purposes, after the merge is complete, automatically the future branch will be deleted.
Correct.
Now how the main repository will be updated, like from developer branch to main repository? Is there any
From
relation?
developer, yes, we'll talk about that, because from
Okay.
developer branch to main repository, we'll firstly have to complete their entire CI/CD lifecycle flow. So when I'm telling that main branch should only have the code that is ready for, or that's a backup code, which is code ready. We'll talk about that. We'll see how the code comes from develop to main.
Question. So as we have enough opportunity for, means feasibility, like to add the users in this repository, right?
Yes,
As a DevOps engineer, if we get some request to add a developer in this repository, we will add that user and we will give some role based upon the
not in
organization.
the repository, in the project. Not
In
in the
the
repository, it's in the project. Yes, you can add the,
how
yes, you can
will
add the
we
developer. Hmm?
how will we maintain this deletion of users? Suppose as a developer I left the organization, then how we will like delete all these users? How will we
Firstly,
maintain?
yes, firstly, when you are working with an organization, you do something called as an active directory integration out here. So if you go into your organization settings, there is something called Azure Active Directory integration. So all the users who are a part of my directory can only be a part of my, or all the users who are a part of my Azure Active Directory can only be a part of my organization, my Azure DevOps organization out here. If the user is no longer a part of my organization, very firstly, in the Azure Active Directory side, we associate or we put in something called as conditional access policies. There is something called conditional access. So if your login is inactive for multiple days, or if let's say you send out an email to that particular respective team, they'll go ahead and make your account inactive. And as and when your account is inactive, using the same account, you cannot go ahead and log into the Azure DevOps organization at all. You cannot go ahead and do a login out here. So from an organization perspective, yes, we go ahead and connect to the directory. So if you connect to the directory, right, it'll tell me please select your active directory, basically which tenant that basically you want to go ahead and do that. Again, it's telling some members will lose the access once connected. 5 out of 6 members won't be able to sign in because they aren't member of the target directory out here, which means that if I look at my organization users, right, only I see there are about three plus, okay, there are about 3 to 5 out here, and only me, which is classes Azure DevOps at the rate gmail.com. These are, or only I am a part of my Active Directory out here as such. All the rest will lose the access because they are not a part of my Active Directory out here. So I can implement a policy on my Active Directory and then control how the users are getting added and so on and so forth out here as such.
Already, what about the already added users? Like how we will revoke this?
Again, that's the point. I don't add the users directly out here as such. Very importantly, when I set up my organization, I set up the Active Directory integration directly. We don't go ahead and add the users directly out here as such.
Oh, okay. So the IAM also comes into picture here for roles. RBACs also comes into picture.
RBACs are applied onto a subscription. They are not applied onto the, let's say, your Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps follows its own set of rules. So users, yes, they have to be a part of your tenant, but permissions to that particular users are assigned from Azure DevOps only.
Okay.
So if you look at,
Got it.
let's say, manage users, these permissions are assigned from an Azure DevOps perspective only. You can go ahead and have custom roles as well out here as such.
Okay, Kiran. There is no way relation with the IAM and RBAC roles.
No, IAM RBSC no relation. IAM RBSCs are strictly towards subscriptions and resources of Azure, wherein when you talk about, let's say, the roles in Azure DevOps, the roles are different. Yes, any more questions here? So just to give you an overview again, I don't have the actual code, but imagine that we have created some .NET application and we have committed that particular .NET application into the develop branch using a pull request. We'll also see that. We'll also see how you do that. Using a pull request, I did this. Imagine that. As and when I do this, right? Now I'm telling my developers that please don't build your code on your local machine. If you do that, it'll be an issue. Please commit the raw code out here. Using this particular code, what we do is that I'm just giving you a very overview out here so that I'll complete the flow and understand what is the branching strategy out here that we follow. There is something called as a pipeline that comes into picture. What this pipeline is responsible to do is that this pipeline is just expected to pick up the code that is there inside this particular develop branch and do a build out of it. Do a build out of that particular code out here as such. If the code is built, the end product of the code will be something called as binaries, DLLs, or in the language of Azure DevOps, we call this as artifacts. Artifact is nothing but the code which is ready to be deployed on top of, let's say, Azure or AWS or any kind of a server out here by using something called as a build pipeline. After that, we use something called as a release pipeline. There are two steps in Visual Studio also that we do, build and publish. Those two steps are being replaced by something called build pipeline and release pipeline out here. So there is something called release pipeline out here as such. Release pipeline. So what do I do in a release pipeline is very simple. We'll take the artifacts and we'll deploy it onto a service that is running in the cloud or on premise. For example, let's say that I'm running it or I'm deploying it onto a service called as web app. All the code is being pushed onto the service called web app, and imagine that this particular web app is being used by a user. This particular web application is delivering the code to all the mobile applications that are running, and as and when the code gets delivered here, you will get a notification on your mobile telling Android 10 is readily available to download. Do you want to install it? Do you want to upgrade your systems, and so on and so forth? Again, I'm just giving you a very hypothetical example on how it really works out. Very high level example out here. So there is this code commit that is done into the develop branch. After that, you have a build pipeline that is coming into picture, which is giving you the artifacts. After that, you have a release pipeline. After that, you have, let's say, the code being deployed and the user being impacted. Once the code is deployed, once everything is working fine, now this is the time that I'll take the code and merge it into the main branch. I'll unlock my main branch for a short period. I'll merge it back into the main branch so that the main branch can contain the backup code. After this is done, now the developers will start working on the code upgrades, telling that okay, fine, the Android 10.0 version is released. Let's say I want to improve something. I want to call it as Android 10.1. So again, I'll create a feature branch as a developer, change the code, update it, commit into the develop branch using a pull request. Again, the build pipeline, again the release pipeline, taking the code, done. One sprint cycle is done. Another sprint cycle, just going and taking my code feature branch again. Let's say going and doing the development, testing it out in and out. Again, going into, let's say, build pipeline. Again, going to release pipeline. Going to, let's say, the particular app service. Code is being delivered to the user. Sprint cycle 2. 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth out here as such. And after each and every time, whenever the code is going to the user each and every time, I'll merge that code into the master branch, so that to make sure that a working code is, let's say, present in the master branch or the main branch. Again, this step, right, of merging the code back into the master or the main branch, it is optionally followed by some organizations. Some organizations probably don't follow it because maybe the life cycle is not that huge. The life cycle is very simple. They probably won't follow it. But I'm just giving you an example of how a typical life cycle flow can be present in an organization out here. And the same thing is also explained in something called branching and merging strategies in Azure DevOps. It's telling adopt a Git based strategy. Then it's telling, what is a Git based strategy? How do you use something called main branch, feature branch, developmental branches? You have a lot of things out here, calling hot fixes, development branches, and all these things out. It's telling how exactly you want to maintain this out, how exactly you want to manage your releases out here, and so on and so forth. And our discussions will follow along these lines. I did not discuss about a build pipeline. I did not tell how the build develop branch integrates with the build pipeline, what is a release pipeline, all that stuff. This is something that is there. This is something that I have to, let's say, mandatorily cover in and out. But I'm just giving you an overview of how a branching strategy will impact the flow of code in an organization out here as such. Yes, any questions here?
In this scenario, where is the testing environment?
Just a second, give me a second. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, in this diagram, where is the testing? We need to test
That's what
that
I'm
code.
telling you. That this diagram is a very high level overview. That's what I'm clearly telling, is that this diagram is a very high level overview. We'll talk about where a testing environment can come into picture. What is an environment? How do you, let's say, do a testing out here, and so on and so forth. We'll talk about that one after the other, because if I introduce all the concepts right now, it'll become very confusing to go ahead and, let's say, consume all that things at the same point out here as such. That's the reason I'm just giving you a very high level overview.
Okay.
Okay, just a second. I'll take a question offline. Yes, go ahead, please. Yes. So we will unlock the main branch every time when you want to do a pull request back again. Unlock for a short period. Once the code is in, lock it out back again. So every time we do that, we'll just unlock it out and lock it out back again once again. Yes. Any more questions, guys? So where's the testing? Where is, again, when you talk about testing, very importantly, I'll again ask a question telling, do you want to do a unit test or do you want to do an integration testing? It depends upon what kind of a testing that you do. Yes, we also go ahead and do that. We'll see how those things are done out here as such.
Kiran, one small question, Kiran.
Good,
So
please.
how the merge will happen between the develop branch and main branch, and who is responsible for that activity? DevOps.
Uh, yes, you can say it's a DevOps engineer's role, or if the organization is too big, we have something called as a release management team. There is something called release managers or branch managers. They can also go ahead and do that. But as a DevOps engineer, we can also control it. For example, let's say that I now need to merge all my code into the main branch out here. So what I'll do firstly I'll facilitate. I'll tell, okay, fine, I'm unlocking the main branch for, let's say, about 5 or 6 hours. We can go ahead and merge this out. And very simple, I'll just create a pull request. New pull request between the develop and the main. And as when you see this, you have one particular commit. Create this out, complete this out, and complete this out here as such. As in when you complete this out, again, when you complete this out, right, you don't have an option to delete the develop branch, because develop branch is the default branch of your repository. You cannot delete it that way. And once it's done, now the merge is in, I'll then go ahead and lock this branch out, so that my regular developmental activities can start flowing out here as such. So it depends depending upon the team size. If the project is too big, you can have one more team called release managers or branch managers out here, who can facilitate this particular operation on a timely basis. Or if the organization is small, let's say the project is small, the DevOps engineer can also take the responsibility and go ahead and, let's say, do this particular merge into the main branch out here such.
Kiran, can you go into the branches option once?
into the branch. Okay, and these options you're talking about, yes.
No, why we have star mark? What is
Here,
the?
it's a default
Huh.
branch. It's a default branch.
Oh,
That's the reason you have a star mark. That's it. So if you change this and say set this as default branch, it'll just change. That's it.
oh,
It's a default branch. So I'll just put my developer as a default branch. So it's just telling yes. And I can also add this to favorites, telling that my favorite branches and all that stuff, so that I can easily bookmark it out. Okay, one question: what is artifacts? Artifacts is nothing but DLLs or binaries that you get after you do a build, for which you just need to understand what is a build. We did this already in Visual Studio. We did a build. The end product of that particular build, we were calling it as binaries. In Azure DevOps, we call it as artifacts. Yes, any more
Kiran,
questions, guys?
here
Mhm.
develop branch is like a non-prod application in Azure, right?
Yes, it's a non-prod application branch. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. For example, we can push the code from our local machine to the cloud.
Hmm.
So automatically the remote branch is automatically deleted, right? In the cloud, not in
The
a local machine.
Yes. Again, not an automatic deletion. It's a best practice. Only the developer who's raising the branch will be able to delete the same thing out here. So when you create that pull request, it will ask you if you want to delete this out. By default, it will say yes. It will be checked out, telling that yes, please go ahead and delete this out. If you want that branch to stay for some reason, like for example, you still need some more commits to be, let's say, going into that, you're not yet done, you can uncheck it out, and you can also undelete, or you can also not delete the branch, not undelete, not delete the branch out here as such.
Okay. For example, I push the request in wrong branch.
Hmm.
Can I revert it back?
Okay, can you come again, please? You did what? Can you come again, please?
I push the request into the some wrong branch to the main branch, sorry, to the development branch to some production branch. I did a pull rise request.
Okay.
So can I revert it back to the original position?
Yes, you can. That's something that we seen yesterday, right?
Yes.
That's the reason we are going via pull request. If I look at a pull request, there's something called revert. Can click this button. I'll say on which branch do I need to make a revert on. And then I'll say revert. He'll just go ahead and
Okay.
do a revert out here as such. So whatever you did will be reverted back.
Okay.
Again,
Thank you.
reverts also need to come via pull request. Yes. Any more questions, guys?
revert means immediate version only. You can be able to revert, right? Not like
Revert
go
means revert
and
means whatever change that one particular PR has done. It's not about the version. It's about the pull request. If this pull request is doing, let's say, 100 changes, all those changes can be pulled back using a revert. Not an immediate version. It's which pull request that you're really targeting, because I can have multiple pull requests, right? A number of pull requests, and I can select one of those pull requests to go ahead and, let's say, pull my changes back out here as such. That's what revert really means out there for us. Yes, any more questions, guys? Again, as I said, I'm just giving you a very, very high level overview for now, because again, Azure DevOps is a new product. A lot of people might not understand this, so I want to make sure that I keep it as simple as possible so that people can understand, and then we can, let's say, build on top of that. So I've not told where the testing is done. What is that? No, I'm not told that yet, because if I just put the entire diagram right now, it'll become super confusing. It'll become super confusing for people, and the chances are people might not be able to follow the lecture. That's the problem of that. So we will, on a daily basis, improvise our knowledge. So yesterday we knew about branches. Now I'm telling about branching policies and branching strategies, and how a strategy is being implemented by the organization. And then in tomorrow's session we'll see how the code is being pushed. What are merge conflicts? How do you resolve that particular merge conflicts? And then once we go into build pipeline, then I'll come back into branching strategy and I'll tell you how the testing is being done and so on and so forth out here as such.
Exactly, Kiran. Correct.
Yes, any more questions, guys?
There are some questions in the chat, Kiran.
Yes, let's see. Steps to deploy the code from on-premise to Azure. What is behind and ahead? Okay, I'll talk about behind and ahead. When you say steps to deploy code from on-premise to Azure, again, it depends. If you want to follow a DevOps practice, uh, code always is on-premise only. Code will always start from on-premise only. Very importantly, code will the birth of a code is in a developer's machine, so it's an on-premise. So when you do a code, or when you say code to on-premise, this is the flow: going into the cloud, going into the branch, processing via a build pipeline, processing in a release pipeline, then going in and deploying, getting deployed into the Azure portal out here. This is the software development lifecycle it follows. The next question that I had is what is behind and ahead. It is how many commits a particular branch is behind, or how many commits a particular branch is ahead from the default branch. For example, if I click on this, and if I click on this one out here, it's telling there is one commit additionally that I've done on this particular branch that is not there on the develop branch. It's nothing but a comparison. So for example, if I go into the branches, right, and click on this, I'll say compare branches, and I can compare two branches out here, and I can tell which branch is ahead of what. So this branch, right, which is called develop revert from develop out here, if you look at the history, there is one comment out here with a number called D0F, something like this, which is trying to, let's say, delete a particular line. But if I go into my commits, go into my develop branch, that commit is not there. You see, that commit is not really there on the develop branch out here, which means develop branch is behind. And if you look at the branch here, this is what it's telling you. It's telling that, okay, fine, this branch is ahead. But if you go into the main branch and say compare branches, again, it's getting a comparison from the main branch out here. And if I look at the file, it's now telling the files are identical. That's the reason you have what? One and one. One behind and one ahead of the develop, which means both are at the same level. Yes. Any more questions here, guys?
Kiran, if I merge the code into the main branch from developer branch,
Okay.
so do I need to shut down my entire system, entire application for
Don't
maintenance?
have to. No, don't have to. You don't have to. See, when you're doing a branch merge, right, from develop to the main, all you're doing is playing around with the system that is there in Azure DevOps. But your application, right,
Mm.
that is running here. The code of the application is actually running here. Your actual working code that is here on a platform like a virtual machine, app service, EC2 instance, whatever it is. So if you do this, if you go ahead and let's say do this one, you don't need to have an impact on your application. Probably yes, probably you might need to, let's say, pause your software development lifecycle for a for a brief period of time, because you need to tell that, okay, fine, we are merging the, let's say, code, or we need to, let's say, do a code pause or something like that for a day or two. But your application will be running. Your application will not have an impact.
So probably how much time it will take to merge the code in
Just a
general?
minute or so. Just a minute or so. Let's see, merge is a very simple process. Just create a pull
Okay.
request, get the approvals, done. The merge is done. So it
Okay.
won't even take you a minute or so to go ahead and do a merge out here as such.
Okay.
Right, so that's it from my end, guys. What we'll do is that we'll slowly build on top of Azure DevOps. It's a new concept for everyone, and new terminologies are involved. So please make sure that we are learning the terminologies, calling artifacts, calling, don't call downloads, call as let's say clone. Don't say save, say commit. Don't say upload, say push. Multiple things out here. So we'll slowly start building on these basics, and we'll reach to a point where we can go ahead and start our build pipelines and so on and so forth out here as such.
Kiran,
Mhm. Good,
I
please.
think if you are done, I have a personal request.
Sure, I can connect with you. Guys, you all can drop off. I'll take a question here and I'll then drop off out here as such. I'll just stop
Stop
this
it
recording.
now.